Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thanks for everybody online for joining us, wherever you may be. And thanks to my stellar panel for joining us today. I'm going to give them an opportunity in a second to introduce themselves, say who they are and what they do, and a little bit about their experience. And then we'll hit some questions and hopefully have a fairly fluid conversation. We're going to try not to take anything too much for granted in terms of names, information, acronyms, that sort of thing. So I may interrupt and ask people to explain from time to time. And let me tell you, I guess I should say a few lines about myself. I'm Dej Mahoney. I'm a lawyer by background. Way back in a different life, I was vice president of business affairs at Sony Music. I subsequently did a stint at Warner Chappell much more recently as VP of Business Affairs. And I now run a legal and business consultancy in entertainment. And we do stuff around music, TV, sport, fashion, events. And I, none of which qualifies me as a specialist in rap, which is why we have these fine people here. So let me start by, I'm going to turn over to Jess to tell us a little bit about herself, and we'll come across the floor and see where we land.
Is that on? All right, okay. So I'm Jess Monroe. I'm currently the Director of Music Partnerships at Soga World. It's a Web3 agency. So by Web3, we mean anything to do with NFTs, the metaverse, etc. I'm also an artist manager, so I currently manage Stardom, who's a Birmingham rapper, a new boy rap group called the Fly Boys, who may or may not be signing to Atlantic, Jeremiah, and previously Band OK and Morrison. So yeah, that's me at the moment.
Hi, is this on? Hi, yes. Hi, I'm Matt. I'm a media executive focusing on records. Most of my career, I was along with Dej in those early years at Sony. So half my career roughly was in major labels. The other half has been in the independent sector. I worked in mainly from London, but spent a stint living and then a chunk working in the Caribbean. I now lead in an advisory board. In terms of the music stuff, I now lead an advisory board to a nascent UK music venture, which called Don't Sleep, and it covers records, management and publishing.
Hello. I am Danny Fay. I am the Culture and Partnerships Director at a company called £30 Gentleman. And £30 Gentleman focuses mainly on brand partnerships. It's where the real bread and butter is in my business. But we also manage and develop talent, so kind of get them ready for those next steps. And we've got a young people focus as well. So our real focus, the real mission of our work is to get young people into the creative industry and create access points for people who might not ordinarily know those access points even exist. But the brand partnerships part, we kind of operate in fashion, music, art and sport. So it's kind of a bit of a quadrant. But hip hop, rap culture is my home culture. It's what I grew up on, it's who I am. So that's why we specialize very much in the rap side of things and create some really difficult partnerships that would ordinarily be quite difficult. We're very good at making happen and be successful ventures. So, yeah.
Over to you, Wale.
Yeah, my name's Wale. I'm an artist lawyer. I focus primarily on artists. I work as associate at Sheridan's, which is a music and entertainment law firm. I primarily work with, in the grime sector, rap sector, Afrobeats, and a lot of the UK upcoming startup artists. And a guy over there is one of my inspirations, Boya D. So when I went to school, he was part of New Brand Flex, which started. It's funny to see him here.
Yeah, beautiful thing. Now listen, from the previous session, we heard a lot about data, really encouraging, inspiring data. And for an old guy like me, I don't want to go too hard into social history, but I think it's kind of really important to emphasize the fact that back in the day, the fact that so-called black music or UK rap wasn't considered to be commercially viable had so many other implications and knock-on effects in terms of the advancement of people in the industry, prioritization, application of finance, allocation of finance. And so one of the things we're here to explore is, and celebrate, is, as we just heard in the prior session, that there are opportunities. And our session's called Take the World, is it up there? Yes, Take the World. And we kind of want to highlight and encourage a degree of global ambition as well. So just on that front, maybe I'll turn to Matt, who's kind of who I know from back in the day, and then we'll kind of bring it forward. We'll bring it forward from there. So Matt, could you just give us like a couple of lines? You'll forgive me if I cut you off, but just a couple of lines to set the scene as to how things were before we got to 2015 or wherever that beautiful upward curve appeared.
Dave's been very kind to not suggest I'm old, but we worked together for many years through the 90s, and we had great times, but it was challenging in different ways. And as Deja's not alluded to, he's actually said, that underlying perception of the commercial potential of this repertoire and the cultural experience that it spoke to in general had reverberations across the whole company and across the media marketplace. I think when you talk about those unconscious biases, they're potentially very subtle because they're about people's perceptions of what things can do, and then all sorts of decisions flow from that. I think in terms of my own personal experience, there are a couple of albums that spring to mind for me that were really pivotal in starting to shift that. Cypress Hill, Black Sunday was one, the Fugees' A Score was another, which started to break that mould of letting all of the people on the value chain and outside of that manifest that potential, and then you turn a vicious circle into a virtuous circle. And I think you can see the progression, and we're in a very different world. It was interesting just seeing some of the slides from the previous session, where you see the little dip. I mean, there's little dips, but you have to look at these over trajectories that are decades long. Stormzy ain't had an album out for a minute. So it's really looking at it with that sort of time frame.
Okay, thank you. And Wally, I'm going to turn to you because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that before you got into the legal game, you were running a business in and around UK, let's call it UK rap. Actually, we're going to come to the genre because I think you might have a few things to say about the genre, Danny, in a second. But we're using that term for the time being. And Wale, could you tell us what your perspective was coming from the business side into the industry, if I can call it, establishment to some degree?
Yeah. So when I started when I was 18. I think after 18, I was massively fascinated with people like Boya D, New Brand Flex, Tiny Temper, who were from my area, who were making music, and this was just my passion. So I was looking at finding music myself, finding artists early, and delivering them to A&Rs that I knew. And there was a guy in our area called Austin, who worked at BBC One Extra at that time. So I had a plug to send music to someone at BBC One Extra. So after university, I did a law degree at Southampton. I was trying to get a job at Clinton's, at Russell's. My CV was far too colourful. So I wasn't able to get an opportunity. So I started a business with my business partner. It's still really successful today. It started off as a good quote, where we had loads of followers, but we also started something called the Good Vibe, where we identified. So it was an Instagram page, where we found writers, poet writers, and then we moved it into music, where we started to identify artists. So I was putting on event nights, sourcing artists. So, for example, my first event night, we had Ray Black, this before Ray Black was signed. We had Jay Warner, and we had a few other people. So we were selling out nightlifes, and we was putting on events. We were putting out mixtapes with artists that people never heard of. So this enabled me was to know a lot of A&Rs really early. This is about, I think, 2013, 2011. And what we were finding was the deals were tough. The deals were seriously tough, because back then what they were trying...
Tough as in not very good?
No, they were just tough. Like, the typical deal with, an artist. I remember I did a campaign with, an example is there was the Mr. Silver came. So Mr. Silver had a record which was really successful, and just the deals that they were doing were single deals. The single deals were really, really low. It was full ownership. It was just really, really tough deals to get through. But then back then, the example was YouTube would pay you £1,000 for 1 million streams, and the people that will love the music consumed it by watching YouTube. They weren't consumers of buying CDs. So it was really tough to get a deal over the line, one, and two, it was tough to get really favourable terms, as people would love to get to right now. So I just remembered that 2015 was the real change maker, where I think that was I think there was a lull, because there wasn't much artists coming through, and then Stormzy had loads of freestyles, and then that was when for the urban scene it was re-energizing. There was opportunities, and when he put out his song through ADA, there was opportunities to get things independently, and then the deals started to move. The deals were starting to move more and more frequently.
Well, I think we'll come back to that in a second, because I think I want to hear a little bit more about that and what exactly happened. Danny, just kind of winding back a little bit on this term we're using quite loosely, UK rap. Do you? I think you had some thoughts about what that is and what that encompasses. So perhaps you could share some thoughts with us to give it a little bit of texture and flavour.
For sure. I mean, I think it's very important to remember that hip hop is a culture that stands on its own. It has a community values system that existed for a long time, but also that rap is something that people were doing before hip hop existed. And I feel like we're definitely in the era of UK rap, and there's a whole other conversation that people could have, especially when people try to attribute the success of grime to hip hop. Personally, I don't believe that that's the case. Grime is its own thing. It kind of always has been. But we're definitely in a space in the UK again, and I feel like we've always been in the space in the UK where MC culture, the blending, mixing of genres, people are very comfortable to do it here. Very, very comfortable to do it here. Where if you go to different countries, you go to different European countries, you go to the States, people who make dance music only make dance. People who make rap music only make rap. Hip hop is its own thing in a corner gathering dust in America. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like this idea, and I suppose it talks a bit to the data as well, because the thing that I find interesting is this downward trend, or this perceived downward trend, that cannibalization that you were talking about. You got people like AJ Tracy, who's definitely a very skilled rapper. He's making rap music, but Labrador Grove's a garage song. Where's that popping up? What chart is that popping up on? So I feel like the success of rap in this country and the kind of comfort of experimenting with different sounds, different genres, digital music, electronic music, it's almost like a victim of its own success, right? So that being successful with those other songs and messing with these dance samples and stuff like that, it might make it look like we're on a bit of a downward trend, but it's still all the way up. That's my perspective.
And whilst we're on that, what do you make of the Afrobeat scene just generally, and how that fits in and around that?
Yeah, I love it. It's everything. Yeah, it's everything. It's been like so amazing to see different African cultures present and up front, just like really at the front of everything. Do you know what I'm saying? But the other thing to remember as well, I kind of come back to grime again, is that there's so many first generation, second generation stars of the culture who come from the continent. You know what I'm saying? You know, so the African influence on UK reps uptick. It can't be. We can't smooth over it. It really has to be acknowledged.
Yeah, no, it's huge, and you don't hear much spoken about it, but I'm sure, you know, when the history's written, it'll be front and center. Jess, just on the, you know, we've talked about in quite broad terms, and I wondered if you'd tell us a little bit about your view on exploitation of and selling of UK rap in the new world, by which I mean the here and the future, just in terms of the work that you do on
Okay.
in the genre.
So Web3 is probably a term that you either will have heard or may understand, may not, but essentially it's the third iteration of the internet. So, you know, Web 1 in the 90s, the first elements of the internet was really non-interactive blog pages essentially and email, and people were sure it wasn't going to catch on, and there's a whole Jimmy Fallon sketch about how ridiculous this internet idea is. And then, you know, Web 2 came, which was social media, and again it was like, this isn't going to catch on, it's never going to become a part of our daily lives, and now here we are. And Web 3 is essentially the third, as I said, iteration of that, but it's going to be the metaverse. So it's AR, augmented reality, it's this gaming world that a lot of teenagers already live in, and it's NFTs and NFT ticketing, things like that. And we're already starting to see what we've just done with So World. We just did H's debut NFT drop. So his debut album came out, obviously went to number 2 in the charts. We did his NFT drop, but that ran alongside that. So essentially it was part of the album drop. So the bundles were including an NFT. So it was the world's first chart compliant NFT drop. And then Muse followed the week after and got number 1. They sold a load of...
when was that exactly?
That was about 3 weeks ago, when he just... Yeah, really recent. And then in terms of the metaverse, so it's terrifying for me. I've got a daughter, and I think, God, is she just going to live in this world that's not real? But we're 5 to 10 years off what it will become. And right now it's things like Roblox. And if you look at Roblox, for example, I think it's 250 million monthly users now, and 70% of them are 16 and under. So if we're looking at the next generation, as in the alpha generation, Gen Z and onwards, they're already in this world, and that's where there's going to be commercial opportunities for rap, for all genres, but I think specifically for rap.
Sorry to interrupt, Jez, but when the little I've read about this stuff, they keep talking about the idea of Web3 or the concept of Web3 or the vision of Web3. I mean, like it's somewhere in the future, whether it happens or not in the way that we conceive. But are you saying it's here and now, and you're working
definitely
with it here and now and making it work commercially?
Yeah, and like I said, we're probably 5 to 10 years off what the metaverse will be. And I think a lot of people suddenly now think the metaverse is Facebook, because obviously they've changed the name, and Mark Zuckerberg did that big video about we're all going to be living in this, you know, we're going to do everything in the metaverse. But right now in the metaverse, there's, as I said, Roblox is a metaverse. It's just a virtual world. So, you know, Lil Nas X has already performed in the metaverse. I think he had 33 million plays of his concert. You're not getting that in real life. There's Travis Scott. A lot of other artists have done bits in the metaverse on Fortnite, etc. Already. And so if you asked, you know, I speak to my Flyboys, the new group that I've got that are 15 and 16, and they all play Roblox, and they've all watched that concert. They've all watched concerts. It's not something that perhaps, you know, I would think of. I'm in my 30s. But as I said, for that next generation, it is already happening. You can do meet and greets in the metaverse and things like that. So on a smaller scale, you know, if you're not at the level of a Lil Nas X to do a concert in Roblox, there is elements that you can start already looking at and commercialising.
I was just going to ask, what was the H NFT? What was it? Did it look like? What did it consist of?
So there was two elements to it. So we did, we had an artist called Funny Tummy who makes sort of graffiti style canvases. So he made, the first element was a recreation of the album artwork. So he went away and did his own version of the album artwork, which was a sort of a picture of H, a photo that he'd made into a painting, and he makes physical paintings, and then he turns them into a digital creation.
One.
So he did. So for the album artwork, it was many. And there was just a time limit on the sales, so it was for the week. So however many sold that week counted towards his chart position because they were sold with a CD or a vinyl.
But I'm sorry,
No,
I'm
go ahead.
getting a sense of quantum. So if he does 10 pictures, you got 10 NFTs, or can you extrapolate that into more?
You can do as many as you want. So that was one element.
Because it's the same thing. If I get an NFT of the same thing as you, what is it?
But it's the same as buying a print of the Mona Lisa, for example. So you could buy a...
So it's not original, it's not distinct from the other NFT.
But you can do one-off auctions. So Ronaldo, for example, is going to do a one-off, and it will be sold for millions of pounds. But what H wanted to do was give access to all of his fans. So they were sold for £12.50. So you're going for scale as opposed to one thing. So the second element was there's 16 tracks on his album. The artist created what was called a mystery box card. So it's a digital picture that came as a mystery box. So again, £12.50. You don't have to buy it with crypto. I think that's the belief at the moment. You have to buy crypto, and then you have to buy... No. You go onto LimeWire. We did it with a partnership with LimeWire, nostalgic. Went on, for us anyway. And again, H didn't even know who LimeWire was when we spoke to him about it. So £12.50, you buy it with your card or with Apple Pay, straight into it goes into your wallet, and you own that digital piece of art. But what it came with was this mystery box element. So 250 were sold only, and of those, 50 people got rewards. So you become part of this little club, an H club, and the rewards were get to go shopping with H, a FaceTime from H, lifetime VIP tickets to his concerts, things like that. So in real life rewards just for buying that sort of token, that NFT, and it's something that will continue for. It's not just a one-off.
I think you talked about it as a sort of old school fan club vibe.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a bit like it's like a fan club. You've bought that's your entry into the fan club now. He'll have a Discord, which is just a sort of an NFT social media platform. He'll talk in there regularly to the people, so that first 250 will become, when he does his next one, might send then sell 500, and the club expands, but you'll always be the first to be notified about things. You might get early access to watch a video before somebody else, before the other fans do, etc. So that's where we're at the moment with artist NFTs anyway.
Thank you. No, that's really helpful. And what I love about this is we're talking, well, what seems like futuristically to somebody like me, but at the same time, one of the key artists that came out of the data session was Central C, and how well he's doing internationally in particular. And I took the precaution of calling Trenton Harrison Lewis, who signed Central C, I believe, and was, from my experience, when I first came into the business, he was a European manager for Public Enemy, which is a pretty serious gig back then. Probably a serious gig any time, actually. But I spoke to him, and he was waxing lyrical and telling me how well Central C was doing. But what was interesting is I was most interested in the international side of things, knowing that I was coming to do this panel. And he started talking about the international story, which, again, we heard about earlier. So and I said, well, okay, tell me how that happened. And he basically, apart from the manager being very active and proactive behind his artist, he basically put it to me that Central C had reached out to his peers in other territories and got into a whole bunch of collabs, and that's how things had developed. And that kind of feels very old school, but sits, I guess, comfortably alongside the metaverse and the NFT stuff that you're talking about. And the question, one of the questions that flows, that I think about is your world specifically more active in rap and hip hop versus other genres?
I think in terms of the metaverse, definitely, and that's because it's a younger audience, and I think it's a younger audience that are following people, the UK rappers, especially Stormzy, H, etc. So definitely in that sense. But then if you're looking at the reason somebody like Muse have done well is because they did it as a bundle with tour sales and physical sales, which are, the older the artist or the band, the more physical sales they tend to sell. But yeah, definitely, UK rap and rap in general are going to be at the forefront of this next shift of the internet in music, 100%. We're already seeing that, yeah.
Wow, okay. You heard it here first. Question, and this is sort of a little bit egocentric, and I'm represented in my shirt, but I just wanted to ask, picking up on something you said earlier, Danny, and this I open out of the floor, especially to Wale as well. What are the prospects and hopes for the success of African music, you know, and the export of music to Africa? So I'm talking very broadly about the international success of Afrobeat, for example, would be a starting point.
Well, in recently, what I've seen, and from looking at the data from the clients that I work with, it's the diaspora standing out and saying they love and connect with the music, and the stuff that we see, especially with the stuff that Burner does, is because there is a movement that is happening across the world. Is people want to connect with back home. There's an understanding that they have roots and they have identity, and the best thing that this music is like an expression of that, and people enjoying themselves, and it's seeing a whole different experience of what home looks like to them, and the music is just so colourful, and it's just translating in, because what I've noticed is the Latin music has done so well, and that's become such an established business. Because Latin music applies, it's the same as African music. There's a diaspora, there's Latin all over the world, and African music is just reigniting so many different communities, and that's what's exciting. With the music exporting backwards, Central C's done something super amazing as well. He was recently in Nigeria at the homecoming, and because Africa has one of the most mobiles right now. People love to watch things on TikTok. That's where the trends are starting. People love to watch things on YouTube and Twitter. So they are finding about these artists because they're creating conversations, and those conversations, people want to be a part of it. So they don't want to be excluded. And because there's conversation around these artists, because of their figures, because of the Shade Borough, the Shade Room and stuff like that, they're starting to be part of culture, and I think there will be more crossovers because they are connecting, they're collaborating a lot more, and before the end of the year we'll start seeing the next rise of where Afrobeat's going, because the next year is going to be the biggest year.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is turning out to be a real party. I'm really enjoying it. It's like good news all the way.
Yeah.
Just a thought again, which springs from my history and my perspective on, or perception is probably a better word, of what's been going on. The United States has always been where we've looked to for success, for international success. You've got to be big in the States, and I just kind of wanted some thoughts on whether A, that still applies. Somebody will have a view on that, but also, what are the alternatives? And just to throw in another little factor is that we've been so successful in other respects with London actors, let alone British actors, black London actors. I was called yesterday by a manager in LA who just loves black. He just said, "Look, all the agents here love black actors. Get me some." So my question, my question is what is it that we're missing in terms, or are we missing anything in terms of the gap between our success with black actors as an export to the USA versus black musicians to the USA?
I think I'm going to address that from a couple of points. I think the African music influences, I think, speaks to a number of things. It speaks to the way tech has connected us globally much more. It also speaks to the confidence of the domestic creative community here, the J Husses, the Pussaloos, who have a confidence that in the early stages of UK rap, where we were really trying to, or the scene had an aspect that was influenced by mimicking what was going on in the States, there's a different homegrown confidence. It's about representing what they see and what they experience in their ends and being able to speak to that vernacular and to those stories. And those stories are often diasporic stories that speak to a homeland that's elsewhere, as well as their immediate environment. And then tech has just connected us all. That bounces around, it goes backwards and forwards. I remember Matt Morgan, my friend who did Afro Punk, he's been doing in South Africa for a number of years. I know that Afro Nation is doing Ghana this December. So that interaction and that interplay between the scene in all its facets, the music, the stuff that's going over the airways via tech, the people that are going backwards and forwards, those artists coming here, our artists going there. It's a virtuous circle, and it speaks to that confidence. To make it relevant to your point, I think back in the day, it was all about North American market, the USA. For size, the cultural hegemony, they were undoubtedly the leaders and still are. And I think, like the reserve currency, they're in an almost unassailable position. They will still be the number one market because of size and the way it relates to media. However, more latterly, we have artists. There are other more peripheral markets developing where you can do business. Where previously, hitherto, you couldn't really do that much business. I take Trinidad as an example. My Caribbean lineage from there. When I went there in 2003, copyright was a joke. You had bricks and mortar stores selling blatantly pirated DVDs displayed as such in a bricks and mortar store that doesn't move each night, which tells you all you need to know about the copyright environment. Digital streaming and DSPs, downloads to streaming has shifted that environment in relation to copyright that's made it conducive to an industry being there, and that's happening across the world. That, combined with this interplay, means that the US will still always be preeminent as a market because of things I've mentioned, but you can, in a cumulative way, do enough business in markets other than that is worthy of your attention. It means it's not quite a multipolar world, but you're not just looking at the US. You're not just thinking, how can I work there? And that's the only thing I can think of. You can say, that's nothing to do with me. I'm gonna do a Ghanaian thing. I'm gonna do something that speaks to that.
We're running out of time here, but I'm going to give Danny I'm going to give you the final word, actually.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the final word, Danny, just in terms of your business and the kind of opportunities that you see and talk about.
Sure.
And yeah.
And I think I would add to what Matt was just saying. Really, is that I think that this era of UK rap doesn't in the first instance look to American rap business, marketplace, industry for any validation. I think those days are like really far in the past, right? So rap culture in England does not look to America for validation. We are the culture. And for so many reasons, we're so much closer to our own heritage. We're plugged into like a massive diaspora and so many other places to make income, where it was a business case. It was a business case to go, we need to crack America. And that's a music industry thing, to try and crack America so that your label can make more revenue, etc. Where now, especially, it was interesting on the last panel, there was a lot of talk about brand partnerships, and I can tell you that there are some artists who they don't really make a great living streaming, they don't really tour, they don't really do much, but their social cachet, especially online, is so heavy that some of these artists are making 7-figure deals. 6-figure deals are normal especially in rap, because when you were looking at the slides and it was saying, look, there's 9 times the social engagement. It's real and it's true. Do you know what I'm saying? And we can create, deals with artists that are in the high 5-figure, 6-figure regions, or they can kill themselves trying to knock out 1 million streams and walk home with $5,000. Do you know what I'm saying?
Understood.
So brand partnerships has definitely been a way for people to get large amounts of money through the door, and it's literally life-changing amounts of money for some of these young artists. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
thank you for that. We've gone beautifully over time, which is a nice thing, and I'm sure we could carry on for much longer. But thank you all. I just want to wrap by saying that I think it's it's been a really inspiring and positive thing for me to hear everything that's going on and actually see some data as well, in addition to your own experience. I'm part of an organization called Action for Diversity and Development, and part of our thing is to advance and uplift the marginalized, which in particular, which would include a lot of people of color in and around the industry. And just hearing some of this stuff is really encouraging, and I hope we can join the dots and keep moving forward with all the enthusiasm that Wale talked about. Apparently it's all happening next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.